So, what's the real difference between a project that absolutely soars and one that just crashes and burns? Is it the plan, the people, the tech? Well, today, we're going to unpack what really makes a project work, from those massive old school designs to the quick, nimble teams we see today. And let's kick things off with a story of what can go spectacularly wrong. Okay, first up, a serious cautionary tale. Back in the 90s, Motorola launched this thing called the Iridium Project. And from an engineering standpoint, it was a masterpiece, a global satellite phone network. I mean, technically, they knocked it out of the park. It was on time, on budget. But in the market, whoa. It was, just as the slide says, a catastrophic failure. So what happened? Well, while they were busy building this amazing thing, the world changed. Regular cell phone networks just exploded, and they basically made these expensive satellite phones obsolete before they even hit the shelves. They followed the plan to a T, but the plan itself was already out of date. And, this wasn't just a one-off thing. The history of business is absolutely littered with failed projects. Some studies have shown just staggering failure rates. I mean, one report found that IT projects in the public sector fail a whopping 70% of the time. 70%! Clearly, something is fundamentally broken with the way we've traditionally gone about this stuff. Now, here's the thing you gotta understand. These failures aren't just random bad luck. Nope, they're usually just symptoms of much deeper problems that are hiding just below the surface. So to figure out how to win, we first have to get real about why we lose. A perfect way to visualize this is the classic iceberg analogy. Above the water, you see all the obvious stuff, right? The missed deadlines, the budget spinning out of control, the tech glitches. But the real danger, the massive part of the iceberg that will absolutely sink your project, is hidden underwater. These are the root causes, things like terrible communication, fuzzy goals, or just a complete failure to adapt. And trying to fix the symptoms without touching the cause, yeah, that's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It's not going to end well. For decades, the standard response to all this uncertainty was to try and squash it with enormous, super detailed plans. So let's take a look at this classic follow-the-plan approach. This is what's often called the waterfall method, and you can kind of see why, right? It's this very rigid, straight-line process. You do all the requirements gathering, and only when that's totally done, you move on to design. Then you build, then you test. Each phase flows down to the next, like a waterfall, and there's really no easy way to go back up. The whole idea is to figure everything out at the very beginning and then freeze it in place. And this quote right here, wow, it just perfectly captures the central flaw of this whole waterfall model. Success is literally defined by delivering on those original frozen objectives. The system cares more about you sticking to the plan than it does about you actually creating something valuable. But as that Iridium project showed us, a perfectly executed plan for a product that nobody wants is still a total failure. So in response to all this rigidity, a completely new way of thinking started to emerge. It was one that didn't see change as some threat you had to eliminate, but as a reality you just had to embrace. And this slide, I think, just brilliantly lays out that massive shift in mindset. On the left, you've got that traditional path, follow the plan no matter what. But on the right, you've got the Agile approach. It's all about being flexible and collaborative. It's a fundamental move away from just blindly following a plan and towards responding to change. It's a total reimagining of what actually matters in a project. So how does this actually work? Well, the Agile process is all about iteration. Instead of one giant waterfall, it's a series of little cycles, often called sprints, that might last just 1 to 3 weeks. You plan just enough to get going, you build a small functional piece of the product, you get feedback on it, and then you do it all over again. And what that means is you have a working, shippable piece of your product at the end of every single short cycle. That lets you learn and adapt constantly. Now, all of that sounds great in theory, right? Faster cycles, more flexibility. Who wouldn't want that? But does this new approach actually get better results? Or is it all just, hype? Let's see what the research has to say. There was a huge study by Serrater and Pinto that set out to answer this exact question. They analyzed data from over 1,300 different projects to find out. And here's what they found. Okay, now I know this table might look a little intimidating, but the key thing to look at is those negative numbers. In the study, a higher use of Agile was coded with a lower number. So a negative correlation basically means that as Agile use goes up, failure rates go down. That's true for overall success, for efficiency, and for stakeholder satisfaction. And those p-values on the right, think of them as a confidence score. The closer to 0 they are, the more certain we can be that this isn't just a random fluke. And with values of 0.000, well, these findings are about as rock solid as it gets. And hey, to put it even more simply, just look at this chart. When you're talking about stakeholders' satisfaction, which is a huge measure of success, projects that are high agile consistently and significantly outperform the ones that aren't. The data is crystal clear. Agile projects just tend to be more successful. So, the answer is just use Agile, right? Case closed. Well, not so fast. It turns out even the best methodology in the world can still fail if it's missing something deeper, something more fundamental. There's a secret ingredient that's behind all successful projects. And that secret ingredient is support. Now, as the researcher Chris Sauer defines it, support is not just getting a thumbs up from your boss. It's the active supply of everything a project needs to thrive. The resources, the help, the assistance. It is, quite literally, the project's lifeblood. Sauer breaks this down into two key types. You've got primary support, which is the direct fuel for the project. Think of it like the water and soil for a plant. This is the actual funding, the help with fixing those annoying organizational roadblocks, and making sure people will actually use the thing you're building. Then you have secondary support, which creates the environment, kind of like the sunlight and clean air. This is stuff like power broking to get you the resources you need, building up legitimacy so the whole organization buys in, and fostering real, genuine commitment. And let's look at a real-world example of this from Sauer's work. There was this thing called the Mandata Project, and it was basically on life support. It lost its main champion, the funding dried up, and it was just going nowhere fast. But then, something shifted. The project regained active organizational support. The money came back, people got committed, and it was completely transformed. It went from being a likely failure to a fully functional system. This just goes to show how incredibly critical that active support really is. So you see, it's not a simple case of plan A versus plan B. The real formula for success is about bringing these ideas together. It's about choosing the right approach and cultivating the right kind of support. So, what are the big takeaways from all this? It really boils down to three key things. First, you have to diagnose your environment. Are you building on solid, predictable ground, or is the landscape constantly shifting under your feet? Second, choose the right approach for that environment. For those dynamic, changing situations, you need a flexible tool like Agile. And third, and this might be the most important one, you have to cultivate unwavering support. Don't just hope for it. You have to actively manage it, fight for it, and build it at every single level of the organization. In the end, it really helps to ask yourself one simple question. Is your project an airplane or is it a helicopter? Think about it. An airplane, once it gets up to speed, can glide for a little while, even if the engine's cut out. It has a certain amount of built-in stability. A helicopter, on the other hand, is inherently unstable. If you stop actively flying it for even a single second, it just plunges right to the ground. A lot of modern projects, well, they're helicopters. They require constant input, constant active adjustment, and that unwavering support just to stay in the air. So, which one are you flying?